Ambassador McFaul, do you see signs elsewhere in Europe that support for more military aid is growing, or is that perhaps hitting a plateau? Talk to us a little bit about how our NATO allies are, as we've moved up the ladder. What's the status of their support for this? Because of course they're closer.
Well, they're having the same domestic debates that we're having within their governments and within their administrations. Just talking to a very senior German official a few days ago in Munich, he recounted for me that the very difficult decision for them to take to provide tanks. And they're a little disappointed, by the way, that after they made that very hard decision, they expected others to come into the fore that have German-made tanks, and they're disappointed that they didn't follow them. So I think this debate is a hard one in all the capitals of Europe. I don't want to claim I'm an expert on all countries in the alliance. What's striking to me when I look at public opinion polling, however, including in Germany, is that societies seem to be ahead of their elites right now in terms of support for Ukraine. And that's interesting. That's something that usually doesn't happen on foreign policy. It's usually foreign policy elites dragging society to support these issues. And I give a lot of credit to the President Zelensky and his government for the incredibly effective way that they have messaged why it's important to NATO, the West, the free world, to support their fight in Ukraine. They like to remind us all, and I completely agree with them, that this is not just some people describe this as just a normal territorial war in Europe. We've had these for 1,000 years, same as it ever was. Why should we care? That's the wrong way to understand this. President Zelensky instead says this is a fight between autocratic Russia and democratic Ukraine, so values are at stake. This is a fight that will not end in Ukraine if Putin wins. And if he succeeds in Ukraine and transforms, God forbid, Ukraine into some forward operating base for the Russian military, guess what? Our allies will feel much more threatened, and we'll have to spend more money and send more American soldiers to the front line to defend our NATO allies. So it's not just something that can be contained in Ukraine in terms of security. And then finally, we know what wars in Europe look like when they're wars of annexation. In many ways, the United Nations was created in 1945 to end wars of annexation. And by the way, another very big principle embodied in the beginning of the United Nations was to end empires. And for decades after that, we spent a long time decolonizing the world. Those were fantastic achievements, even in the construct of a Cold War. Today, those norms are being threatened. We cannot allow annexation to become normal again. Think about that. If we're back to that, that has implications for all over the world. That's an anarchic, very dangerous world that I don't want to go back to. And same with colonization. Let's be clear. Putin is trying to re-colonize Ukraine after independence 30 years ago. Imagine that in other countries, other places around the world, that 30 years after independence, the British or the Portuguese or the French decided, hey, wait a minute, I want to go back in and try to re-colonize. We have no interest in seeing that. I think Zelensky talks about that in the right way, and I hope the rest of the world hears his message.